Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Hub. Today's story is one of my favorites.
You want to know about survival? About the moment when everything you thought you knew about yourself shatters like glass against a wall. Let me tell you about the night I finally stopped being afraid. Douglas always had perfect timing. He knew exactly when to strike when I was already fragile, already questioning myself. That night, I just closed the biggest case of my career. A corporate merger worth millions. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was walking on eggshells, hoping he'd be in a good mood when I got home. "You're late," he said without looking up from his laptop. The apartment felt smaller when he was angry, like the walls were closing in. "Your phone was going straight to voicemail." I was in court. "You know I can't, don't." His voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't make excuses." I set my briefcase down carefully, the way you'd handle a bomb. 5 years of this dance, and I knew every step. Apologize, deflect, survive until tomorrow. But then my phone buzzed. A client emergency, a gallery owner facing eviction, needing an injunction filed first thing in the morning. Real people with real problems, not like the corporate giants I usually defended. Douglas's hand shot out faster than I could react. My phone flew across the room, the screen spiderwebbing against the hardwood floor. "You're nothing without." He hissed, his fingers wrapping around my wrist like a vice. Some pathetic lawyer who can't even keep her own life together. That's when it happened. Not the explosion I'd always imagined, but something quieter, more dangerous. A single thought that cut through years of conditioning. He's wrong. I looked at him, really looked, and saw him for what he was. Small, insecure, afraid of losing control over the one thing that made him feel powerful. "Let go of me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. His grip tightened. "What did you say?" I said, "let go." Something in my tone must have surprised him because his fingers loosened just enough. I pulled away, grabbed my keys, and walked toward the door. "Where do you think you're going?" he called after me. I paused at the threshold, not turning around. Anywhere but here. The door closed behind me with a finality that felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. I drove aimlessly through the city, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Where do you go when you've just walked out of your life? I'd been so focused on surviving Douglas that I'd forgotten how to live. Without him, the gallery was a mistake. Or maybe it was fate. I pulled over to check my shattered phone, trying to piece together my client's address from the fractured screen when I saw the light spilling from the windows. Even at midnight, someone was inside. Madison Cole, though I didn't know her. Name then. I just saw a woman about my age, paint-stained apron tied around her waist, hair twisted up in a messy bun, completely absorbed in the canvas before her. She moved like she was dancing, her brush flowing across the surface with a confidence I envied. I should have left. Should have found a hotel, dealt with the legal crisis in the morning. Instead, I found myself pushing through the gallery door, drawn by something I couldn't name. She looked up as the bell chimed, and I expected annoyance. Instead, she smiled, this brilliant, unguarded expression that made my chest tighten. "We're closed," she said, but not unkindly. "Though you look like someone who could use some art therapy." "I'm sorry," I gestured helplessly at my phone. "I'm trying to reach Madison Cole about an emergency injunction. The landlord is threatening to lock her out tomorrow." Her eyebrows shot up. "Well, this is convenient. I'm Madison Cole, and you must be the lawyer who's going to save my ass." She wiped her hands on a rag, leaving streaks of blue and gold on the fabric. Everything about her was vibrant, alive in a way that made me acutely aware of how gray my own world had become. "Victoria Evans," I said, extending my hand. Her fingers were warm, slightly rough from paintbrush calluses. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through me, and I pulled away too quickly. "You look like someone who hates color," she said, studying me with those artist eyes that seem to see everything. I glanced down at my navy suit, my sensible heels. "I just prefer structure. Structure's overrated." She gestured around the gallery at the explosion of paintings covering every wall. "Life's messier than that. More interesting." I wanted to argue, to defend my carefully ordered existence. But standing there surrounded by her work bold strokes and wild colors that seemed to pulse with life, I felt something crack inside me. "Let me fix that," she said softly. The next morning, I was back at the gallery by 7 a.m. with a temporary restraining order that would keep Madison's landlord at bay. I'd worked all night, fueled by coffee and something that felt suspiciously like hope. Madison answered the door in yesterday's paint-stained clothes, her hair even messier than before. She should have looked tired, disheveled. Instead, she looked radiant. "My hero," she said, accepting the legal papers with a grin. "Coffee? I make terrible coffee, but it's caffeinated." She led me to a small kitchen tucked behind the main gallery space. The counter was cluttered with paint tubes, brushes, and what appeared to be her only clean mug. "I can't accept payment until the case is resolved," I said, falling back on professional protocol because it was safer than whatever was happening between us. "Who said anything about payment?" She handed me the coffee, her fingers brushing mine as I took the cup. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent heat racing up my arm. I flinched, pulling away so abruptly that coffee sloshed over the rim. Madison went very still. "When's the last time someone touched you kindly?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I set the cup down with shaking hands, suddenly desperate to escape. "I should go. I have other clients." "Victoria." "Her." Voice was gentle but firm. "When?" The truth sat in my throat like a stone. Too long. So long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched without fear, without calculation. Douglas's hands had been weapons for years, to control, to punish, to remind me of my place. I donned single quotes T. I started, then stopped. What was I supposed to say? That I'd been so busy surviving that I'd forgotten how to be human? Madison moved closer slowly, like she was approaching a wounded animal. "You don't have to tell me, but you don't have to carry it alone either." I looked at her, then really looked, and saw something I'd almost forgotten existed. Kindness without agenda. Concern without strings attached. "I left him," I whispered, "last night. After 5 years, I finally left him." She nodded like she understood everything I wasn't saying. "Good, that took courage. I don't feel brave." "One feel terrified?" "Brave people are always terrified. That's what makes them brave." She reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, her fingers covered mine, warm and sure. "You're safe here," she said simply. And for the first time in years, I believed it. Over the next few weeks, I found myself at the gallery more often than strictly necessary. Madison's case was straightforward. Her landlord was trying to force her out to make room for a corporate chain, but I kept finding reasons. To stop by, to check on developments, to review paperwork, to bring coffee that was actually drinkable. The truth was, I was addicted to the way Madison looked at me. Like I was more than just a lawyer in a suit, like I was something worth seeing. "You're not just a lawyer," she said one evening as I sat in her office, reviewing lease agreements while she worked on a new canvas. "You're a storm waiting to happen." I looked up from the contracts, startled. "What?" "All that fire you keep locked away. It's beautiful and terrifying." She set down her brush, turning to face me fully. "What are you so afraid of?" "I'm not afraid. I'm cautious. There's a difference." She laughed, but not unkindly. "Honey, I've seen cautious. This isn't cautious. This is hiding. The words stung because they were true. I'd been hiding for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to live in the open. Douglas used to say I was too much, I admitted. Too intense, too driven, too everything. Douglas sounds like an idiot. Madison's voice was sharp with anger. You're not too much. You're exactly right. She stood, moving to where I sat surrounded by legal documents. Paint streaked her forearms, and I found myself staring at the way the colors seemed to bring her skin alive. You know what I see when I look at you? She asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Power, real power, not the kind that comes from tearing other people down, the kind that builds things, creates things, changes things. Her hand came up to cut my cheek, and I leaned into the touch before I could stop myself. You're not broken, Victoria. You're just ... dormant, like a volcano waiting to erupt. And you're what? I asked, my voice barely audible. The match. Her smile was dangerous, full of promise. Say the word. The word came 3 nights later in the form of Douglas's voice on my phone. You need to come home, he said without preamble. This little tantrum has gone on long enough. I was in my temporary apartment, a sterile furnished place that felt like a hotel room staring at Chinese takeout I had no appetite for. I'm not coming home, Douglas. We're done. No, we're not. His voice turned cold, calculating. You think you can just leave after everything I've done for you? You were nothing before me, Victoria. Nothing. You're wrong. Am I? Look around. Look at your pathetic little life. Eating takeout alone, working for peanuts on some artist charity case. Is this what you call living? Each word was a precision strike designed to hit where it would hurt most. And God help me, it was working. Doubt crept in, insidious and familiar. You need me, he continued. You always have. Come home and we'll pretend this never happened. No, the word came out stronger than I felt. Victoria, I hung up. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I was running. Not away this time, but toward something. Toward someone who saw me as more than just the sum of my fears. The gallery was dark except for the security lights, but I knew Madison would be there. She worked late most nights, lost in her art the way I got lost in my cases. I pounded on the door, rain-soaked and desperate. When she opened it, her face immediately shifted from confusion to concern. What happened? He called. I said, water. Dripping from my hair. Douglas. He said ... He said things. Madison pulled me inside, her hands gentle on my shoulders. What kind of things? That I'm nothing without him. That I'm fooling myself thinking I can make it alone? You know that's not true, do I? The question came out raw, desperate. What if he's right? What if I'm just deluding myself? Madison's hands came up to frame my face, forcing me to meet her eyes. Listen to me. You are brilliant. You are strong. You were everything he told you you weren't. How do you know? Because I see you, really see you. Not the version he created, but the real you. The woman who works 18-hour days fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. The woman who walked away from comfort because she knew she deserved better. Rain drummed against the windows, and I felt something shift inside me. Like tectonic plates realigning. Let me remind you, Madison whispered, and then her lips were on mine. The kiss was everything I'd forgotten about being alive. Soft and demanding, gentle and consuming. Her hands tangled in my wet hair, and I pressed closer, desperate to feel more of this warmth, this connection, this proof that I was more than the sum of my wounds. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I realized I was crying. I'm sorry, I started, but Madison shook her head. Don't apologize for feeling. Don't ever apologize for that. She pulled me closer, and I buried my face in her neck, breathing in the scent of paint and possibility. I'm scared, I admitted. I know, but you're here. You're alive. That's what matters. For the first time in years, I believed her. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of stolen moments, of learning to trust again, of remembering what it felt like to be seen and wanted and valued. 3 weeks of Madison teaching me to paint, her body pressed against my back as she guided my hands across the canvas. 3 weeks of falling in love with a woman who painted the world in colors I'd never imagined. I should have known it was too good to last. I was in court when it happened, arguing a motion for one of my other clients. My phone was on silent, so I didn't see the 17 missed calls from Madison until the bailiff called for recess. Her voicemail was frantic, broken. "Victoria, they're here. The police. They say I stole ... They found paintings in my storage unit. I would never. Please, I need you." I ran. Literally ran out of the courthouse, still in my heels. In court suit, my mind already racing through legal defenses and bail procedures. The gallery was swarmed with police. Madison was in handcuffs, her face pale but defiant as they led her toward a patrol car. "Madison," I called out, pushing through the crowd of onlookers. She turned, her eyes finding mine across the chaos. "I didn't do it, Victoria. I swear to you, I didn't do it." "I know. I'll fix this." But as I watched them put her in the car, I saw him. Douglas, standing across the street, partially hidden in the shadow of a building. When our eyes met, he smiled, that cold, calculating smile I knew so well. He'd done this. Somehow he'd orchestrated this entire nightmare. And in that moment, I realized that leaving him hadn't been the end of the war. It had been the beginning. I'd thought I was a good lawyer before, competent, thorough, professional. But watching Madison sit in that interrogation room, her hands shaking as she maintained her innocence, I discovered what I really was. I was a weapon. The case against Madison was circumstantial but damning. 3 stolen paintings, minor works, but valuable enough to constitute grand theft, had been found in her storage unit. Paintings that had gone missing from a private collection 6 months ago. The police had received an anonymous tip about suspicious activity at the gallery. The timing was too convenient to be coincidence. I worked around the clock, calling in favors, following paper trails, pulling threads until the whole tapestry started to unravel. And at the center of it all, like a spider in his web, was Douglas. He'd been patient, methodical, using his connections in the art world to plant the stolen pieces, timing the anonymous tip for maximum impact. He'd probably been planning this since the night I left, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy everything I built. But he'd underestimated me. More than that, he'd underestimated how far I'd go to protect someone I loved. The first crack in his plan came when I traced the storage unit rental. The signature was Madison's, but the handwriting analysis I commissioned told a different story. The pressure points were wrong, the letter formations too deliberate. It was a good forgery, but not perfect. The second crack came from the security footage. The cameras at the storage facility showed someone accessing Madison's unit on the night the paintings were allegedly placed there. Someone wearing Madison's jacket, a distinctive piece she'd been wearing the day she was arrested. The same jacket that had gone missing from her apartment 3 weeks ago. The same day Douglas had called me. That the killing blow came from Douglas's own arrogance. He'd used his personal credit card to hire the forger, probably thinking he was being clever by using a fake name. But financial records don't lie, and neither do timestamps. When I walked into that courtroom for Madison's hearing, I wasn't just representing my client. I was representing every woman who'd ever been told she was nothing. Every person who'd ever been crushed under someone else's need for control. Douglas was there, of course. sitting in the gallery, probably expecting to watch my world burn. Instead, he watched me tear apart his carefully constructed lie. Your Honor, I said, standing as the bailiff called the case. The defense moves to dismiss all charges against Miss Cole based on newly discovered evidence of prosecutorial misconduct and deliberate evidence tampering. The prosecutor looked stunned. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The defense is prepared to present evidence that the defendant was framed by a third party with personal vendetta against. Defense counsel. I laid it all out, the forged documents, the planted evidence, the financial records linking Douglas to the crime, the timeline that proved Madison had been set up. When I called Douglas to the stand as a hostile witness, the blood drained from his face. State your name for the record, I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Douglas Hartwell. And what is your relationship to defense counsel? We used to live together. Used to. When did that relationship end? His jaw tightened. About 6 weeks ago. And how did you react when Miss Evans ended your relationship? Objection, relevance? Your Honor, I am establishing motive for the witness's actions against my client. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Hartwell. Douglas's composure was cracking. I was disappointed. Disappointed enough to threaten her? I never threatened. You told her she was nothing without you, didn't you? You told her she'd regret leaving you? I may have said some things in the heat of the moment. Things like, and I quote from the voicemail you left on her phone, "You'll see what happens when you try to replace me with some pathetic artist." Is that the kind of thing you said in the heat of the moment? I've been bluffing about the voicemail, but the look on his face told me I'd hit my mark. I want a lawyer, he said. I'm sure you do. Your Honor, based on the evidence presented, the defense requests that all charges against Miss Cole be dismissed and that the district attorney's office investigate Mr. Hartwell for perjury, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The judge looked at the prosecutor, who was frantically shuffling through papers. Given the evidence presented, charges against Miss Cole are dismissed. Mr. Hartwell, you have the right to remain silent, ... As they led Douglas away in handcuffs, he turned to look at me one last time. You think you've won? You think this is over? I met his gaze without flinching. It's over. You just don't know it yet. Madison was released that afternoon. Charges dropped, record expunged. We walked out of the courthouse together, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I owe you everything, she said as we stood on the courthouse steps. You don't owe me anything. I just did what needed to be done. She turned to face me, her artist's eyes seeing things I was still learning to acknowledge. You saved me, again. You saved yourself, I just gave you the tools. We went back to her loft that night, both of us exhausted, but wired with the adrenaline of survival. I kept expecting Douglas to appear, to find some new way to hurt us. The fear was a living thing in my chest, making it hard to believe we were really safe. Madison must have sensed it because she took my hands, holding them steady when they started to shake. He can't hurt us anymore, she said. How do you know? Because you're not the same person who left him 6 weeks ago. You're not the same person who walked into my gallery that first night. She was right. I could feel the change in myself, like a snake shedding its skin. The scared, controlled woman who'd lived in Douglas's shadow was gone, replaced by someone I was still learning to recognize. I'm sorry, I said, the words rushing out before I could stop them. I'm sorry he targeted you because of me. I'm sorry. You had to go through that. Stop. Madison's voice was firm. You're not responsible for his actions. You're only responsible for your own. I know, but no buts. You fought for me. You fought for us. That's what matters. She led me to her bedroom, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I let myself really look at her. The woman who'd been willing to risk everything for a chance at something real. The woman who'd seen past my walls and defenses to find the person I'd forgotten I could be. I love you, I said, the words tumbling out before I could second guess. Then Madison's face softened and she pulled me closer. I love you too. All of you. The lawyer, the fighter, the woman who paints like she is afraid of making mistakes. I am afraid of making mistakes. I know, but you're here anyway. That's what courage looks like. Her hands found the buttons of my shirt and I didn't flinch. When she began to undress me, instead I helped her, marveling at how different it felt to be vulnerable with someone who saw that vulnerability as a gift instead of a weakness. When she traced the old bruises on my back, faded now, but still visible, I tensed, waiting for the pity or the questions. Instead, she pressed her lips to each mark, a benediction, a promise. You're alive, she whispered against my skin. You're free, you're here with me. And for the first time in my life, I felt it all the way down to my bones. 6 months later, we opened our new practice, Evans and Cole, Art and Advocacy. The name had been Madison's idea, painted in bold letters across the front window of our shared office space. It's perfect, she'd said, standing back to admire her work. Professional enough for your corporate clients, creative enough for my artist friends. I'd worried about mixing business with personal life, about the challenges of being both partners and partners. But Madison had a way of making the impossible seem simple. We already know we work well together, she'd pointed out. Now we just get to do it legally. The practice was exactly what I'd never known I wanted. I handled the legal side contracts, copyright disputes, gallery licensing, artist rights. Madison handled the creative consultation, helping clients navigate the business side of the art world. We specialized in cases like hers, artists being pushed out by gentrification, creators being exploited by galleries, intellectual property theft. The work was challenging, often frustrating, but it felt like purpose in a way my old corporate job never had. You're different, my former law partner had said when I'd run into him at a bar association event. Happier, more ... alive. He was. Right, I was different. I'd learned to fight for things that mattered, to use my skills for creation instead of just destruction. I'd learned what it meant to be seen and loved for who I really was. Any regrets? Madison had asked me that morning, as we'd prepared for our first joint client meeting. About what? Leaving your old life behind? The partnership, the money, the prestige. I considered the question seriously. Douglas was serving 18 months for evidence tampering and conspiracy. My old firm had settled out of court for the harassment case I'd filed. I was making a third of what I used to make and working twice as hard. No, I'd said and meant it. No regrets. People ask me sometimes how I knew, how I recognized love when it came disguised as an emergency injunction at midnight, how I found the courage to leave a life that looked perfect from the outside but was rotting from within. The truth is, I didn't know, not in the beginning. I just knew that Madison made me want to be brave. She made me want to take up space in the world instead of shrinking into the shadows. She taught me that love isn't about possession or control. It's about seeing someone clearly, all their flaws and fears and broken places, and choosing to stay anyway. It's about building something together that's stronger than either of you could create alone. The painting hangs in our office now, the one I've been working on the night Douglas called. It's abstract, messy, imperfect, but it's mine. Madison helped me finish it, her hands guiding mine as we layered color over color, building something beautiful from the chaos. Art is about transformation, she'd said as we'd worked. Taking something raw and making it into something new, something that never existed before. She was talking about the painting, but I knew she was talking about us too, about what we'd built from the wreckage of my old life. Sometimes clients ask how we work so well together, how we manage to be both business partners and life partners without killing each other. Madison usually grins and says something about complementary skill sets or shared vision, but the real answer is simpler and more complicated than that. We work because we see each other, really see each other. We work because we chose to build something together instead of tearing each other down. We work because sometimes when you're brave enough to walk away from what's killing you, you find what makes you come alive. And when Madison pins me to my desk in the middle of the day, her lips against my ear as she whispers about the client meeting we're about to be late. For I remember that some things truly do defy explanation. Some things are just worth fighting for.